got any questions to start with? Okay. Well, Taylor and I've divided this up. He's gonna start the program, and then midway I'll pick it up. So.
Good afternoon. Nice to be with you today. I was driving in today, couldn't believe that it's been 10 years. 10 years ago, I couldn't imagine that it go so fast, and that we would be here telling the story of the tragic fire of 2010. So this is the way the building looked pre-fire. You can see it was all, everything was painted one color. If you look today, there's some teal green that we were able to find some wood that did not burn, and went back and found the original colors. And that's what you see today. It's better. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And we were working on the building when the fire occurred. We were doing some miscellaneous repairs and renovations, primarily replacing windows. There were some rotten soffits that were being replaced, and some of the internal gutter copper jointing solders had come apart, and so there was some hot work needed on the project. And the project was moving along well, and one day the roofers were up in this southwest corner on the opposite side here, doing probably maybe one of 3 or 4 areas of hot work, and they sparked some wood. They didn't know it, and the fire got in the attic, and the wind was coming out of the west, and there was a series of big wooden trusses, about 8 feet on center, 10 feet on center, and it just it was an attic fire, and it was just a series of, it burned its way from the west to the east, and the tower cupola served really as a chimney. It was, the smoke was billowing out of here, and it was a tragic fire that at about 1:30 or 2 in the morning, that tower fell backwards into this room, and basically all the wood was burned out. So what was left were the 4 exterior walls. And coming from the east, one thing, go back.
When you say hot work, what exactly do you mean?
With soldering.
I'm going to.
One thing that was pretty lucky with the work we were doing was with some of the work that we were doing to these soffits and replacing some of the trim and rotten wood. We had to take very detailed measurements of all of this. We had a crane here. We hung in a basket and actually had tape measured. So we had very detailed drawings of all of these details, all the way up to the top of the cupola, because there was rotten wood up here too that we were replacing. So we had very detailed drawings of what those measurements were, the profiles. And so when everything burned down, we had the blueprint of what to put back. So that the only, but it was very, very lucky, because we were able to go back and work to those profiles. So just a couple of pictures. This was the room we're in pre-fire. You'll see it's basically the same. A lot of the wood detailing is the same. Originally, we believe there would have been a wood ceiling. There had been a series of renovations in the building over the years that, replaced it with more, modern materials, but we've decided to go back with wood ceiling, sort of as an homage to the original. And one thing that was really nice, Chatham County stepped up immediately after the fire and voted and decided they were going to put the building back. There was, yes, sir.
Just out of curiosity, so sparks sparked it in the corner, I assume they're in the attic. But how long before it was noticed and already?
I believe.
Slow or long for a couple of months.
Yeah, I don't know how it was too long. I think it was in the afternoon when it happened. Judge Baddour, there was an active court case going on that day, fire alarm went off. Everybody got out, luckily. But then you started seeing smoke. So I think the way I remember it, it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And we were over in Chatham Mills, that was our office then, and you could look out and see smoke. By the time I got down here, there were fire trucks. But it was late in the afternoon, and then by the time the roof fell in and the tower fell in, I think it was 2 in the morning. Something like that. But anyway, there was a task force set up that, to decide the new courthouse was either planned or under construction. So the needs for this to be a courthouse were not the same. So the question was, does it get rebuilt as a courthouse sort of historically, or is it a multi-use space, community space? But that task force, I was co-chair, ultimately decided that it would be put back in its historic form. It can be used for courts proceedings, but it's a permanent home of the county commissioners. So that's how the building's been used. You can, like I said, there have been a series of renovations over the years. You can see downstairs there was this ceramic tile. These were the doors. When after the fire, we realized there were transoms originally over these doors, which if you go down there, you'll see those have been put back. These 2 corridors were on fill. It was like a slab. But then each quadrant, each of these 4 spaces off of that, they were on crawl space, which was interesting. So it's a hybrid. We ended up filling up, raising these with stone, so everything's on a concrete slab. Now that you can see, these were a series of renovations over 100 years that had gotten the building to where it was. And so the fire gave us, there was an opportunity there to go back to maybe more of the historical nature of how it was. There's a pretty dramatic photo. So this obviously, this late in the afternoon, the flames were rolling, but while it's still daylight. Next slide. We had everything scaffolded, and these were these wind screens that kind of they got burned up, but the flames finally got into the wood tower. And next slide. One more slide. Yeah. So that door, basically, and this is basically where this wall is. So the floor where you're sitting did remain; it was removed. But this is what was left, basically 4 walls. But pretty dramatic. Everything really, the walls came through. They're 2 feet at the base, 12 inches up, 30 feet in the air. So the structural nature of the walls were pretty good. We had a structural engineer come in and evaluate the condition. You can see where a lot of the heat was with where the trusses were bearing and where they were hitting it with the most water. There was the tops of the walls were the most fragile, which we took down and built up, back up a bond beam with concrete block for a new bearing surface. But in general, the walls were in good shape. The bearing walls on the first floor were in good shape. It was, everything was just wet. And we had a temporary project, which we had some slides to dry it out.
Was this floor concrete all the way across? Wood and concrete?
It was wood. Everything was wood. And they were all bearing on the masonry walls. There's concrete now. But yeah. No, that was, I think that was carpet padding. Yeah.
This will be after the, some.
Yeah, this was after, you'll see this, there was a lot of junk in this room. There was a demolition project which cleaned it out. This is after that project. There's some more photos. That's looking east from the main crossing. That's where the Historic Museum is now.
Excuse me, got one question. Person wants to know where the clerk's office was at that time.
Right there.
I think it was right here.
There.
I don't exactly, I know that the DA's office was back here where the clerk was. I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, they're pointing to the lower left-hand corner of this photograph.
Depends on window.
Yeah,
Oh, lower right, I'm sorry.
that's right here. There you go. That's this room, the two clocks, you see two clocks, everything sort of fell in here. So that was a pretty dramatic photo. But you can see the type of destruction that was here. It was a sad day for everybody. So, like I said, we did a temporary roof, we put a temporary roof on the building. And ran air through the top and bottom just to dry the bricks out. That probably took about 10 months, almost a year. So
You see the bond being top.
yeah, there's the bond beam we talked about, and their bearing surface that these bear on. But you know, it took a while to figure out new design, I mean, what it was going to be, the new design, insurance, all of that. So while all that was being figured out, we could at least stabilize the building and try to dry it out. One thing I do remember post fire is that there were, I thought it was really interesting. There was in front around the construction fence, a lot of people put flowers, even though no one died. It was just, it's a building, not just a building, but no one died. But the flowers were put here for the building, and I think everybody felt like they had lost certainly the symbol of, you know, the most visible symbol of the town and county, but it didn't feel like the same place. And I think everybody had a sense of loss, and some people expressed it through the flowers, which I thought was quite interesting. Next slide. Yeah, I mean, not the best looking building, but it served its purpose for a long, people who were here, you probably remember it looking like this. These, you know, the portico out front, it survived, the columns survived, everything, you know, masonry was in pretty good shape. Quickly run through the current floor plans. On the ground floor, we have the museum front door on the north side, exhibits. This is the Historic Association office and storage room. We have public toilets in this quadrant, and like I said, the exhibits. And we were able to reuse the existing elevator shaft, new elevator, new stairs, an office over here, break room right here. Pretty much put the second floor back like it was. We worked with the State Historic Preservation Office with these plans. really their main focus, they wanted the floor plan spaces to remain, the corridors, circulation to remain historically accurate, but once you got in spaces, you know, there was more freedom to do updated design, but it pretty much follows what was here before. The fire with the judge's bench, which if you, after the presentation, you should go look, some wood, like on the floor and some miscellaneous, heart pine was able to be salvaged. And that was planed down, dried out, and the floor of the museum is from the original, had this original wood, and the judge's bench and the witness stands or the desks are original salvage wood. So that was nice to be able to keep that. Then on the third floor, we just have HVAC equipment and the judge's office here. I don't know that toilet made it, but this stair tower was able, it came through okay, and the steel stairs were able to be salvaged, so that is something that made it. And then it was it's a building section cut through east-west. You can see, sort of shows you the volume of spaces. With the, I guess this would be looking north, that's looking this way. With stairs here, here's the space we're in. You can see we have these sort of private functional spaces on the east side. And we put back, these are all new steel trusses that bear on the new bond beam I talked about. All that's new masonry here, new copper roof, but you know, everything from here down, structure, the walls remain the original, everything here off the roof, and all the finishes are up. Yeah, and rebuilding the tower was tricky. One of the trickiest things was going from a wood structure to a steel structure. Everything's out of steel, everything's sprinkled now. But you're trying to, you have to hide the steel. And like I said, all of these little details that we had hung from that basket with a crane and measured, we had all them. So we knew the profile that we had to match. We just had to figure out how to get the steel back up and pack wood back out to make profiles look the way they did historically. So that was something that we didn't have to guess at. And I think if you look at pre and post fire images today, they're not exact, I'm sure, but they're pretty, it's hard to discern any differences. Oh yeah, there's a truss that runs, you see it. This is a truss that runs out over these columns. We were worried about the integrity of these exterior columns, so we made the decision not to reload them. So there is a truss that reaches all the way back and comes out that carries the tower. And they actually do not, there's no bearing on these columns out there. It's a cantilever. So you don't see it, but all of the structure and force is taken by that huge truss that supports this steel. So these columns, although original, they're not doing any work. So kind of an interesting detail. So I'm going to turn it over to Grim. That's what we did pre-fire. The putback, there'll be some really interesting photos that he'll take you through, and we'll have more questions at the end. Thank you.
So this is actually under the Roman streets. This is a Roman ruin. This is inside the courthouse. You can see this is when we had the temporary roof on. And these interior frames are holding the walls in place. They were there to keep the walls stable. And then the contractor guy, they took everything that was left. This floor, all the plaster, anything that wasn't brick is gone. That's what we were left with. I love this picture. And so you can see exactly how this is as if the masons left, a short time before this, and and the construction was ready to begin. This happens to be looking, I think it's looking less. But you can see the openings. Those are these 4 quadrants, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is cross hall, east and west, north and south. Very formal, traditional plan. So anyway, so all those walls are stable and determined to be stable, and we can reuse them for the next one. Another picture. Why it's divided, except maybe we cut it.
Showing either side, both sides.
Yeah, you can see, so there you go. So in this particular case, where you're sitting is where the picture's taken from. This is the floor. Go ahead. That floor, that edge right there is where this wall was. So, and when we after the fire you're in here, if you were standing here, you drop off, but the pews were still there, carpet was still there, walls were painted, sky was blue. It was weird. It was weird. So all of that had to be taken down. You can see some of what's left over here. But that's the frame that was there to drive the building out. And there's one of the fans that we put in the building to just pull air through it for better.
How did you dry out?
Just took everything out and then just let it sit and change the air change with fans. No water could get in it. And it worked. We didn't have any problems with moisture after that because the building had been filled with water from hoses and instead of sand. These downstairs floors were wood, so water was underneath. Yes.
So are these the original?
No, they're similar. Those are similar pews. They're not.
You said the original ones did.
Yeah, some of them did, and they're around. We didn't have enough to, and they weren't in good enough shape. I mean, they were damaged, but there's some of them still around in certain places, but I don't know where now. But these are similar. These are pictures of when as the demolition was proceeding, tearing out things, sort of beginning to this picture is in this corner, maybe I think over here. One of the things we uncovered, I don't know if it's in this string of pictures, but people say there was a balcony. And we've seen some locations where it looks like a ghost line on the walls.
That might be it right there.
It might be there. That might be it. That might. Anyway, there's some ghost lines, and people were saying that they remember that having sat in the balcony. We couldn't reasonably put it back. But anyway, interesting story.
On the fire codes.
Yeah. So you see these little slots in the wall. This is where the floor joists would be notched into the wall. That's the way these were built. So that and they were set into the wall, but they were cut on an angle so that in the event of a fire and the floor falls in, it caves into the middle. If they were not cut, when they fell, they would peel the brick up. They would force the brick up in a consistent line around the building. And that's so this was the traditional way of protecting a building when it caught on fire. And I've never seen one except here, and it worked. I was just I always know what it was. I just never saw it actually work. But it didn't damage any brick where the joists were put in the wall. But that's how it was done. This is either one of these two exterior walls. It is actually in the picture. But you can see this. There's the bond beam we're talking about. Well, anyway, that might have been
That's the elevator.
I think
I think that's that.
Yeah, and I think that's that corner. That's where a stair of some sort appears to have been there. Just one of the things. This was another picture. This is on the west lobby from the door. That's the stair that was there when we got here. That wasn't the original stair. This would have originally been a different kind of opening. That was closed in to some degree there. We replaced that stair with wood. There were two stairs, and there were two stairs. One of them was one on each side. When they put the elevator in, they took that stair out, and so there was only one stair there. This is looking north from that lobby. Standing there's the elevator channel there, right there. This is probably looking east, part of the demolition. That is a shot of this back stair that's immediately behind here, and we were able to salvage it. It had not been damaged that much. That's part of the same thing. Just had part of this wall was kind of behind this wall. There was just a doorway that was just suspended. That's block. That's concrete block. Everything else fell down.
Grimsley, at what point in history was that steel staircase installed?
I'm not sure, but the building had been renovated a number of times. Yeah, my sense is that this was maybe 70s, 80s, something like that. It used to have an addition off of the east side that everybody remembers, which is unfortunately gone. And so there were a number of different renovations to this building, but this was probably 70s or 80s. You know? Puzzling on this a little bit, why this was here. But there were things we found. This is actually on the first floor below the wood floor. So there was about maybe 3 feet or so. Then there was earth, and so this was not a good plan. Plus, there was a lot of water been getting in on the north side, so they had deterioration there, and there really wasn't any point in putting back the wood floor. So we backfilled it with gravel or a slab, so that now and the original slab and the original on the corridors would have been brick. Those were brick pavers. We found them under there, so originally it was brick, and so the stories of them riding the horses, through the courthouse could be feasible considering it's all brick. This is an arch. There was who knows about the story about Tom? Well, the story was that there was a tunnel that ran somewhere from the courthouse. It was supposed to go up the street and come out somewhere up there. I've heard different stories. So when we did this, everybody wanted to know where we found the tunnel. Well, we didn't find it, but we kept the story alive for a little while because we did find an arch in the foundation wall, and that would have been put there to make an opening. To what? We don't know. And there was the idea that people would escape. I guess whatever. This building was built in 1881. So I guess people, they needed to escape around where they would go. But supposedly they would go that way. So anyway, we found this arch, and we did our best to figure out what it was, and we could not find that it did anything other than just be built into the wall. There is a small room in the southeast corner that was a heating and air conditioning room now, but it used to be was a restroom down there. That's where that wall was. We found parts of that wall in that room downstairs.
Grimsley,
Yeah.
Mr. Drake, who was clerk of court, took my father down, and that's where they stored some of the historical documents at the time. They have now been transferred to Raleigh.
Good.
Before they deteriorated completely.
That's interesting. Somebody told a story that they were being drafted, and they were taken down in that room and in that corridor, in the hallway down there to be sworn in. I think that's the story. Sure, that's what happened to him, but I can't say he didn't. So there was a room down there they used for different things.
That's right.
Yeah. So this building had 4 fireplaces in each quadrant. And so they weren't being used at the time we were doing this. They've been closed in. One of them you'll see in a minute. One of them actually had safe. So all of these were closed in, and the chimneys had been taken down sometime in the late 1900s when they did the roof. They took those chimneys down. We didn't choose to put it back. These are brick that were taken down. The gables came off. Gables fell off, damaged. So, and so that's, we salvaged as many of the brick as we could. There's this safe was in what is now still down there. Matter of fact, if you look, it's in the Historic Association's office, put into the fireplace, and it's got a chamber underneath it, and it's got some names from somewhere in Chatham County. It came from a bank or somewhere in another part of Chatham. This is some of the wood that was salvaged from the after the fire that was reused in this work. This is the elevator shaft that was put back in its current location. This is a picture. This is during construction. All of the plaster was off, which we didn't put plaster back everywhere. Plaster is a tricky thing. We felt like it was really important to put to make the downstairs corridors historically as accurate and historical as we could. So that corridor, we actually put back the plaster on the masonry walls, and we put the transoms back. We did all the work we could to make those 2 corridors historical. The rest of the walls are pretty much, we furred them out, and then we used gypsum board, sheet rock on those walls, but the wood detailing is as characteristic as we can make it of what we do. Some of the steel going in, you can see the frame being fit in. So none of the walls carry these floors. Those are carried independently on columns. The steel goes out to the walls and attaches to the walls to keep them stable. But any weight is being borne on columns.
And they took the shoring out.
Yeah, the shoring would be left in until they got the steel out. Steel. Well, I must say I mean, it's the right thing to have done, but it was kind of sorry that you couldn't go back with wood, but we just couldn't, not with fire codes the way they were, not with, the experience that they had was they just couldn't put this fire out. So we're not gonna have enough fire, not with the building, maybe something else inside, but not due to the structure. So that's it. So what? It's just been a really wonderful experience for us. It's just the centerpiece of Chatham County, and the way the community just stepped right back up and said, no, this building's important. I mean, the day was burning, people were leaving. I did. I mean, it was that important to us, and so that it's put back in its place, such it won't have to be. It's good for another 100 years at least. But anyway, the county commissioners, people of Chatham, everybody stepped up and said, "This is what we want to do." So that's been thrilling. It's a different. It makes what I do feel good. What's the most satisfying thing about it is something that matters to me. Like
One thing I will mention, one thing you've heard is we've got the acoustics in this room were very bad. they had to stop court proceedings when trucks would go around in a circle. The windows would shake, so if you hear, what you don't hear right now is a big improvement. That's laminated glass with a lot of attention paid to acoustic fabrics, sound absorbent materials. So what you don't hear now is one of the bigger successes for people who use this room a lot. That was a nice, we didn't realize what a big deal it was until people used it again. And they were like, it's a totally different space and much more. Oh, yeah, it did win the highest, project won the highest award from the North Carolina Association of Architects. It won the Tower Award. When there's a blackout as you go down the stairs. So that was a nice feather in the cap to this project, and really proud for Chatham County to receive that.
So the oldest part of the building is still excellent. The exterior walls, but newbie here, but I understand it was poured out somewhere else. Its location was selected. But what was the oldest part that's left of Bridge?
I would say it's the walls, because everything else,
Here.
this would have been 1881. And this was about second or third courthouse. They were down towards Robeson Creek. It moved up, it was in a couple of different places. They were frame buildings. This was a frame building at one point. No, when they took this one down, they reused the windows that were in the old courthouse and put them in this courthouse. Brick were made locally. Said in the thing I read, said that this was the architect's first project. I'm impressed. But I'd say the brick walls.
Taylor, what was some of the most intense discussions you had on the committee after the fire as to what you were going to do with this building?
Here for this. There was just an intense discussion on whether it goes back in its historical nature. There were some people who thought it'd be a better sort of community flexible space that maybe lease it out or rent it out or do different things in this room. This is the main room, obviously. But I think the way I remember it, that might have been a 3-month committee, but ultimately the decision was made, to put it back like this.
One of the options was to make it apart.
Yeah, one of them was to tear it down.
Tear it down.
Yeah. There was tear it down, or once that was decided against, the use was the real discussion. So
Then when the courtroom was reestablished, this courtroom has got all of the technology that any courtroom at the time it was built, all the modern technology was tied to the state court system. All of that electronic gear and everything had to be coordinated with it. That's part of all these screens, and so that any trial that we take place in here, and some trials have, although it's not usually used for that purpose.
the John Edwards trial, when it burned.
Yeah. That's why they said they set it on fire.
Yeah.
The tape was in somewhere.
So that was a rumor.
Oh, of course it was. It was.
Mr. Burke.
The original drawings, are they blocked? Any idea where the
I think we have some more current renovation drawings, but we didn't have original drawings, which is why I felt lucky that we had the information we had from the project we were working on. That, I mean, we could have probably come close, but certainly nowhere as close as we did, because we hung in that basket for the better part of the day, getting everything moldings, had it all. We were able to put it back.
And what was the story with painting?
Painting is a William Pitt, yeah.
Yeah.
The original was, I guess, it was old and pretty famous, but when it burned, it was gone. So they had it repaint, they had a record of it. They had an artist paint a new version of it. And, so some of its ancestors still live in Chatham. But
Can I speak to that for a moment?
yes,
The painting that was here that burned was a reproduction of a painting of William Pitt, the elder. Had William Pitt the elder was who Chatham County was named for, and his son, William Pitt the younger, is who Pittsboro was named for. So there's a painting in London of William Pitt the elder, and that's the painting that burned was that. So you have a copy of a copy.
Thank you, Walter. That's must fill in a story, yes.
Well, my question, it may not apply to architecture, but how much of the historical museum's materials? How much,
Our original,
got saved, how much stuff got saved?
well, yeah, Cindy wanted, Cindy, you want to address that, Cindy?
Sure. So when Taylor was talking about where things were located in this building prior to the fire, there was a room that he called the storeroom. That storeroom, which is downstairs kind of that corner, was the museum. So in, less than 2 pews here, that was the museum. The things that we had in there were not that many, because we had some of our content was at members' homes. And as these two gentlemen can tell you, there was a lot that got burned, but there was even more that got wet. So a lot of our stuff got wet, but not destroyed. So the things that we have in our collection today are mostly from after that, or they were off-site at the time.
And may I add to that, the fortunate location of that museum was underneath the restrooms, which had a tile floor, which meant that not all the water that went in this part went there, so it was protected somewhat. But it's still wet.
Those rooms, both those rooms were originally vaults. They were actually vaulted. The vaults had been taken out in one of the earlier renovations. And I think maybe one of them was actually held a prisoner, maybe if they were going to go to court or whatever, but there's the sheriff's office was down in this corner too. And the story about it, there was a divot in the brick floor in there, poured moonshine in, and if you lit it, and it was blue, the guy was guilty or something. So,
Did a photo here.
this one, somebody else can take a shot at it. Well, there's no road, there's no road in front. Chimneys are there. Yeah. Statues there.
It almost looks like there's an ancient telephone pole or electric wire.
Yeah, yeah,
I guess it'd be late 1800.
I would say that sometime, yeah.
About
The village,
it'd be about 1940.
Really?
1935, 1940.
1935, 1940. Yeah, any of these courthouses, this would be, no, it's all what we know. So there wasn't any evidence that we.
Projector for that projection screen. No, it'll go up so you don't see it. But that's for the commissioners, when they meet, they look at that.
Oh, I see what you mean, yeah.
And you all
Yeah.
show, yeah. It's not the best looking thing, that's.
See, one thing we did, so you can see here what the original colors.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things we used, when we went to those places and scraped paint. So the green that's out there is the original color. And so that's part of, you see the chimneys and,
Current weather vanes, local
Yeah.
artist, John,
yeah,
Wanamira, he was commissioned to put that, he was all into it. He really wanted to have part of the rebuild, and he got the cap on top, so I was happy about that.
The lighting on the clock and the tower, especially nice.
yeah, that, we paid a lot of attention to that. And the original thing was set up for clocks. And they didn't have clocks for a long time. Then somebody gave 2 clocks and then we've added to it. The clocks that were there, the intention was to put them back. But after the fire. So this one now, the ones that are up there now adjust themselves for daylight savings time. They're on a solar, whatever to keep them exactly on time. So
It was the Johnson Blair family that donated the money for the clock.
What were some of the biggest challenges you had in reconstruction and how you tackle those challenges?
I think going back with steel structure in a way that you wouldn't know it, and especially, like I said, redetailing all of the profiles of the wood, coordinating the steel and how the wood attached to that, so that at the end it looked the way it did, but it's framed totally new way. That was pretty tricky. It took a lot of time, detailing, and study, but that was probably trickiest. Then getting all the modern technology in the way that it's not obtrusive. I mean, you see things what you're seeing, but just trying to keep it as historically accurate, knowing that it's going to be basically a brand new modern building. That interplays. That was a challenge.
Original have the picture. There was no elevation. Yeah.
that was because the ceiling you were looking at in the older picture was a suspended. So that was actually suspended below the original. And some molding, there would have been some molding, we're satisfied, there would have been some molding there. It was either wood ceiling or plaster ceiling, based on what we saw, it would have been wood ceiling. This is our attempt to be something that's in keeping with the size of this room and the nature of this particular style of architecture. And we had to go ducts around the outside. So we had to make space for those ducts to be there. And lighting and sprinkler systems. This is a wood ceiling, but it's actually suspended on a grid. And it has openings for air to circulate.
And the attic's one of the most interesting parts. There's a hatch in there that there's a catwalk that goes out to the middle, goes north to the tower, and then there's a series of ladders that get you all the way to the top. So it's really interesting to be up. Yeah. And it was pre-fire too, but it's a neat place.
Taylor spoke of it. These columns are most unusual. We still can't figure out exactly how they did it. They're actually concrete, and they're all different. So they're not formed. It appears to me that in some way they were made on site, so that they made them up and then fluted the wet concrete, but we didn't know how strong they were. And all it would do would be take, if one of them broke, might still, but if one of them broke, I don't know what you do to put it back. I mean, it would be I wouldn't know where to start because they're all different. They weren't exactly in the same alignment. So reloading them and you have to anchor, everything has to be anchored down now to resist a hurricane. So you couldn't anchor it down to that. So that truss idea really answered the problem.
Got a question for each one of you as individuals. What did it mean for the two of you to work on this project as a father and son?
It means the world to me. I've been in, I'll put in, this was, Taylor and I worked closely together on this. And I've been practicing quite a while before he and I set up our practice in Pittsboro. And this is by far the most enjoyable and rewarding period of my professional life. And I'm just thankful to have the opportunity to work on this.
Yeah, I'd agree. I was aware at the time, it's such a unique opportunity. And there's not a day that goes by when, you know, you don't ride by it and remember some aspect of it, but it's nice. I ride by it a lot. Where we go, you know, my dad and I. And that's one of the more rewarding parts. And it being a public building, we, you know, a lot of times finish a project, hand the keys to the owner, and that's sort of the end, but we get to keep using this. We, you know, we have kind of a bond over this project that kind of it keeps growing and it's still alive. So it's been a real nice part to the project that I think it means more as time goes on. Especially being sort of center where.
And like the rest of you, I've been driving around this building since I was a kid. You go to Pittsburgh, you drive around the circle. And so it's always been a landmark. And even though I didn't live here specifically, when you came back, you drive the circle. And that's always been just the idea that after all that time, we'd be able to work on it. It's one thing. The other, whenever I drive by, I usually think of us hanging from that bucket or climbing up on the very top of the cupola, figuring out how that roofing metal had to go together to keep it dry, put that weather vane.
And I don't know about you all, but I ride by a lot. Sometimes I go, did that really happen? You just, that was a long ordeal, and it was a big deal, and it was national news, and it was state news. So it took a long time to figure out all the way to get us back here, but you know, it's 10 years, and there are days when it just sort of seems like a dream, but it wasn't.
So
When you first saw the smoke, it was allowed to come in and try to get all the records out that they could. This was paying for that entire, like that.
they evacuated, I think they just evacuated the building.
And didn't they? And everything they should have.
No, I think that we had I might have been, that's probably that next week, as soon as possible, we had a structural engineer on site to just figure out what was stable, what wasn't. And then I remember the historic records getting taken out. I don't remember how long after that was. But it, you know, I don't think it was, anybody couldn't just come on site. It was I think it was fire marshal's office. They escorted people in and escorted people. That was very controlled. But I do know that once some of the stuff was taken out, people did get bricks, wood that was charred and things like that. But it wasn't a whole lot left, really. But it was very, safety was of utmost importance, because it was a dangerous place for a while.
Perhaps after the fire of the courthouse where you see the fire.
That was me.
That was you.
The photos of the demolition afterwards. I mean, those particular ones I remember taking. But our office took, I think, the ones that you saw today.
There was also a video done about the courthouse fire. And that you can find it somehow. They can Google it. I think you can find
It was on North Carolina PBS. It was a documentary that showed statewide, but it told the story of a version of the story.
Pittsboro Street, courthouse. When you walk up, and it was the gathering of the community. And I remember thinking it was like we were having to wait for our building. And I was wondering if that was the first time ever that happened. But it felt like we were mourning someone, but we were mourning the building.
It's interesting because I've told this story before. I was surprised at how many people came up to me and said, I don't know why I'm feeling so bad. It's just a building. But, buildings probably mean something different to architects. But I think it did show the power of certain buildings, what they symbolize, what they mean in society, what they mean in people's memories. And I think that people commented that they were surprised how they felt about the loss of a building where there was no people lost. And I do think that sentiment you just expressed was very present. It was a wake for the building. It really was.
But historic artifacts and buildings are the touchstone of the
Yep,
past. You
yep.
have to have a connection to the past.
That's right.
Forward in the future.
Yep.
Whatever kind of history it is, even more important today.
And I think
It's gone. We lived in California for over 40 years. It gets paid. DOT puts a line on it. The golf courses come in, churches come in, things burn, or the city's burned several times during the gold rush. Precious left down and just, Disneyland.
It's true, and I think that that's one of the reasons, that's one of the things that the Chatham County Historic Association sort of has a part of its work is to document and preserve and make efforts to protect and preserve existing buildings. We have a national historic, a national register historic district in Pittsboro, which is not common. I mean, there are in North Carolina, but this is a very important thing that this community did. And it marks these buildings as having historic significance, and we still need to do, there's still a lot more that we have to do to protect it. But I think everybody's concerned that Pittsboro is going to get sort of run over in the development, and we're going to lose the character of our town. But this is the center of it. This is pretty good stake in the ground, I think. It says that.
Well, they recently found that it's a Revolutionary Era grave, right? And exhumed those people.
There's over
Yeah,
how far?
no,
Yeah,
you can be.
they were under I don't remember, under the dumpster, but it was in a place where it was in a parking lot, and it's shocking, really. Interesting. I mean, it's stuff like that all over. All right, so thank you all for coming. We're still going to stick around for a few minutes, but hope you enjoyed the program. And I'm really glad to see people as interested in this building as you all are. Thank you.
I didn't mean to make you hear out.
Thanks, Jim.
It was a good question.
It is.